The first thing a woman in the Middle Ages might encounter was female duels. Some novelists portray the medieval era as a time of chivalry, where noble lords treated ladies with proper courtesy. If a lady was insulted, a brave warrior would immediately rise to her defense. However, in reality, a knight wasn't always eager to protect a noblewoman, so sometimes she had to take up arms herself. Female duels were rarer than men's, but they were often just as fierce. Some noblewomen might feud over a suitor, and since a brawl would be beneath their status, they settled it in a duel. They would appear gracefully on horseback in full battle gear, armed with lances, shields, swords, and maces. Women didn't just fight other women, they also dueled men. For example, in 1935, a land dispute arose between two lords, and one challenged the other to a duel. However, the accused lord suffered a gout attack and couldn't fight, so his daughter stepped in to defend his honor. After winning the duel, she dramatically removed her helmet and let her hair down to show everyone that this arrogant man had been defeated by a woman. Unfortunately, not all duels ended well. In 13th century Europe, so-called marital duels were common. These were used to settle domestic disputes, and in extreme cases, they served as an alternative to divorce. The man, armed with a club, stood waist-deep in a pit, while the woman fought him from above with a sack of stones. The husband won if he knocked his wife unconscious. The wife won if she dragged him out of the pit. Blows to the head were allowed, as were tactics like jamming the club between the woman's legs. If the couple reconciled, the fight ended. But if the conflict was serious, infidelity, infertility, or land disputes, the losing man was executed, while the defeated woman was buried alive. In the late Middle Ages, 15th to 16th centuries, topless rapier duels became popular among noblewomen. They removed their upper garments to ensure that metal or bone corsets didn't provide an unfair advantage. This practice persisted until the 19th century. Interestingly, in medieval Russia, women were also allowed to duel men on equal terms. Fashion has always been bizarre. Today, thick eyebrows and long hair are trendy, but 500 years ago in Europe, different traits were valued. Christian laws were strict, requiring women to dress modestly, especially covering their hair. An uncovered head was seen as a sign of adultery, and a woman without a cap or headdress was considered a harlot. To comply, women began shaving their foreheads and plucking their eyebrows, as a high, bare forehead was seen as a mark of piety. You may have noticed medieval women in films wearing dresses with extremely long, wide sleeves. Was this just fashion? No, these sleeves had a practical purpose: saving women's souls. According to medieval Christian rules, touching the altar during prayer was essential, but women were forbidden from doing so. Since Eve had tempted Adam to eat the forbidden fruit, all women were seen as weak and untrustworthy. So, ladies found a loophole. They touched the altar with the edge of their sleeves instead of their hands. Another odd trend? Many medieval women appear in paintings with prominent bellies, even if they weren't pregnant. Why? Because looking pregnant was fashionable. First, bearing heirs was a noblewoman's primary duty. Second, a rounded belly signaled good health and fertility. So, even non-pregnant women wore fake belly pads. Punishments for unruly women: if a modern woman struggles with personal flaws, she might see a psychologist. But in the Middle Ages, behavior correction was far more brutal. Mask of shame. Used from the 15th to 18th centuries, this iron mask was forced onto gossips, slanderers, or disruptive churchgoers. It had a spiked plate that pierced the tongue if the wearer tried to speak. The victim was then paraded through town on a leash. Another device of similar purpose, the scold's violin, was designed to peacefully resolve conflicts. It was essentially a pair of shackles that clamped two people face to face, forcing them to confront each other and work out their differences rather than turn away. For example, if a husband and wife argued too loudly, disturbing the neighbors, they might be locked together in this contraption and paraded through town until they reconciled. Similarly, if two quarrelsome women brawled in the marketplace, They could be bound face to face and kept that way until they embraced Christian forgiveness and peace. Yet another method of punishment, intended to make ill-tempered women reconsider their behavior, was the ducking stool. The offender was seated on a chair attached to a long lever and repeatedly dunked into a cold river. As the French writer François Maximilien Misson put it, this helped cool her immoderate ardor. Later, the stool was also used in witch trials. If the woman drowned, she was deemed innocent and forgiven. Even with modern medicine, childbirth is no easy feat, but in the Middle Ages, it was especially perilous. Due to injuries during delivery and subsequent complications, roughly 1 in 4 mothers died before the 18th century. Compare that to today's statistic, 1 death per 5,814 births. The reasons were simple: severe bleeding and infections. The problem was that until the 1880s, no obstetrician thought to wash their hands before procedures. As a result, contracting streptococcus or staphylococcus during childbirth was easier than catching a cold today. Doctors of the past, unaware of the true cause, vaguely referred to this as childbed fever. Before a medieval lady went into labor, priests and lawyers literally advised her to do 2 things: confess her sins and draft a will, just in case. To ease the process, women were given a drink called caudle, a revolting concoction of eggs, cream, porridge, breadcrumbs, wine, sugar, salt, honey, ground almonds, saffron, and ale. It was thick, foul-smelling, and tasted dreadful. There were 2 ways to escape these horrors: become a nun or rely on effective contraception. Some women wore neck pouches filled with earwax, black cat bones, donkey dung. The last ingredient was particularly effective, if not at preventing pregnancy, then at least at keeping suitors at a distance.